My grandfather's an artist. My mother's an interior designer. Kind of grew up around design and art and all that stuff. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, video people, I have the wrong resolution. They were asking me, and I messed it up. So you guys get to see me look extra wide. I love great design, though, right? And my first job was actually as a graphic designer, because I thought, hey, I love design, I should totally do this. But I was terrible, absolutely terrible. My boss had to keep sitting me down and going, Hampton, this is not right. You should not be doing that. But it turns out I'm actually a pretty damn good programmer. So now I make tools to help people who can do that magical thing that I love and absolutely cannot do. This is the prettiest slide, by the way, I'm going to have the whole time, so that's where we're at. So obviously Haml, SASS, and MoveWeb, and we'll be going over that stuff. I have some extra talents, though, I like to open up, letting people know about that you probably don't know, so these are fun facts. I'm really good at reading my phone in bed. So, hey, gotta have something, right? Also, I am an artist. So, that is a real piece of art that is sold on a cruise ship, and I took a photo of it, and I think it's the only one on the internet, and I love it. So many puppies. And then before I really get rolling, right, there is a bit of a legal issue. I'm sorry, guys. So I'm assuming everybody here has used SASS, and very few of you are actually compliant with the license. So, I don't know if you've read this, but if you use the software, you must pay me a compliment and buy Nathan jelly beans. So, you got a lot of compliments and a lot of jelly beans to go out there and purchase. My lawyers will be in contact very shortly to ensure compliance.
Love you, Hampton.
You're welcome. And hey, compliance, that's all we need. You can compliment my shirt, anything, really. So the story starts, because I'm going to start with a little bit of history of SASS, because everyone is doing that, and they're all from different perspectives. So mine is a very different perspective than I think most of the ones you've heard so far. But actually, in 2004, I was in this great city. I unfortunately made $40,000 a year and worked as a personal assistant and got $15,000 in debt, in which case I fled to Canada in 2005. Yeah, it's really much more fun to be in this city when I actually make a decent living now and can enjoy it properly. But so I was in Canada, and this Rails consultancy basically hired me on as their first hire. And so I hit right as Rails was kind of starting, so like pre 1.0, basically. And we were out there building stuff for clients. And it was awesome, right? It's great to be early in a technology because it can really get your career moving a lot faster than it would if you're working in a slower moving technology. But one of the things I kept working with, or hitting, was my coworkers. I worked with a great front-end developer named Anthony Watts, and just a super amazing guy. Great at graphics, great at CSS. And the fellow programmers would do stuff like this. So just like div, kind of name, go down a little bit, I don't know, spit out the email, let's just wrap this next thing in a div, not really sure. And it drove me crazy, because here was this guy who could make what we built and make it so beautiful. Yeah, my voice really is gone. And then this is the crap we were giving them. So I basically, and then also you would work months on a project, and this would kind of be what would be the actual output of my work, and I hated that. So, Haml. Basically, Haml takes something that written in properly semantic HTML and makes that really, really straightforward. And basically also makes it look like CSS. That was one of the big design things. I hated that there was this mismatch, like here I'm doing class equals and over here I'm doing something else, and it didn't really make any sense. Also, the percent sign. One of the design constraints of Haml was control characters, which basically the idea is that everything on the left-hand side has meaning. So when you look at this, these are the control characters. Why did I pick the percent? Because it was hard to reach. So, hey, HTML5 semantic tags and people who love Haml, I made it hard to write tags that aren't class-based. Because Haml wants you to do stuff like .post, super easy, right there, bam, right, just hit that. And then I got a div already kind of built for me. If you want to do something weird, you've got to use the percent sign. So yeah, sorry about that. But back then, to stop my coworkers from just doing div, I'm like, hey, it's easier just to name it. Just do .name. stop messing around. .post, do that. It's a lot easier. And also, when you look at control characters, you look at, so this is a layout page in Haml. And, I have used Haml for a couple of years at this point. When I look at this, if you've never seen Haml before, then this looks like a hot mess to you. You're like, I don't fucking know what's going on. But when I look at it, my brain kind of does this. Because you just follow the left-hand side. And I understand the structure of the document immediately. And there's even hints about those equal signs tell me some sort of processing is happening here. Don't worry about it. If you want to go investigate, read the line. So you can kind of deal with something like this and just kind of understand, I've got a bunch of generated content here. Okay, I got some structure. Basically, I've always kind of had a fascination with expert systems, which is basically, well, in my definition of what an expert system is, I know there's like a branch of AI that's expert systems, and this is not that. But this is when you're at the airport and you need to change your flight. Or I guess this was maybe 10 years ago, so things are a little different now. And then basically you go to the counter and they start going, right? They would just like be nailing through whatever the hell was going on. And then they're like, oh, you want an Aussie? Right? That's an expert system because they knew exactly what they were doing with it, right? It was not for people who do not know what they're doing. This is not about, I could not walk behind that system and go, okay, I'm just going to start doing this too. It would make no sense to me. Also, for some reason, Blockbuster Video, do you guys remember how hard it was, like how much they had to type? I never knew what was going on. Scan my fucking card, scan the thing, here's the money, we should be done. But I was always fascinated at all that clicking that happened, right? And so Haml definitely for me was, I wanted to build my own expert system. I was like, look, this is Rails. I do my databases, I build my migrations, I model this shit, I launch sites, right? Blog in 15 minutes. People haven't done Rails, it's all real. For real, it's super fast. But I was like, when I'm doing HTML, I want this to do what I need it to do immediately and as fast as possible. And so I built this for myself, and I think it was almost a full year before I ever showed it to anyone. I actually had a coworker who was like, stop working on that, it's terrible. And another partner in the business was like, fuck that, we're going to Europe. So I applied to RailsConf Europe, I think it was 2005, where I came in, presented Haml to the world. And in high school, I think I went to prom, was the only time I was out on a Friday night. My parents are awesome, we had a lot of fun hanging out together, watched a lot of movies, very cool. But at the time I'm like, all right, I was 22, how could I go and pitch something like this? So freaking weird. So I knew people would look at it and be like, what? But in my head, I kind of knew this is what I wanted to be, right? That's like, how do you pull that off, right? So I'm this nerdy little kid, how can I be that guy? And I mean, it's even worse than that, because, that's the guy I was as a kid. Yeah, bottom left. Yeah. Oh shit, yes. Look, when you got embarrassing photos out there, just show them in front of a crowd. It just gets it all done. I love this photo too, that I must have at some point, my dad's like, let's get together for a family photo. And I'm like, hold on, Dad, I need to get a microphone. I'll be right back. Ready to go. When I came out to my parents at 18, they were shocked. Yep. Denial is not a river in Egypt. So anyhow, this is funny. So I fly to Europe, right? And this is the closest I could find to a pre-shot. So I'm flying to Europe. I'm very nervous. I'm the kind of junior developer at this really small company. I'm about to come talk about this insane thing that I came up with that I haven't really shown to anybody. And the one person I showed it to hates it. Also, it was the person that I made who had to reach further and they weren't doing good code. But anyhow, so how do I do that? So we're in London, and I decide right before doing that talk that I need to look like a badass. And my coworker's like, let's get you a mohawk. So I actually found this photo recently. I didn't know it existed. This is me getting a mohawk in London. The venue was across the street, and this is about an hour before my talk. I'm just like, yeah, let's do it. And then also, I think famously, my mom would have been so disappointed and if she knew any of this. But especially worse is that I just decided to buy a bunch of alcohol, and we gave out wine to the audience. So that's why there's empty wine bottles there. And then I was drinking a beer. which I think DHH mentioned in a keynote like 2 years ago that something about that he liked that. I don't really like beer, by the way, just as a note. I just did it for pretending like I was a badass. Oh, and those glasses are fake. Yeah, and it's all out on the table. It's all out on the table. So I'm there and I'm doing this, right? I get like the super small room because who the fuck is this guy? And so I start my talk, right? I'm going. And then in the back of the room walks in somebody, and then they sit down right in front of me, right down the aisle. And it's Mr. Blue Eyes himself. DHH, staring up at me with those classy blue eyes as I'm doing my talk, which I was like such a fanboy. And I'm like, oh my God. I think I even stopped during my presentation for like a second to like breathe. Just look at those eyes, holy shit. Do you know he's a race car driver too? He like placed in Le Mans, like properly has a trophy because he's awesome. Fuck that guy. But one of the interesting things about the talk too is Hamel when it first came out was super limited. Like no control structures, no looping. I was like, fuck dynamic content. Like this is to structure your page, do a layout, that's it. Don't do anything fancy. We're not doing crazy conditionals. You should avoid those when possible. And amazingly, for how limited it was, it got a really great response, which was super cool. And this was the original site for Hamel. I use the way back machine. Did I tell you guys I'm not a designer? Did I tell you I'm not a designer? This is what I made. Luckily, I was rescued shortly after that by a friend who made this. Who's a proper designer, actually came in and pulled this off. Now, some of you guys who aren't familiar with Hamel might think this page is a little familiar because it's basically Nathan and I afterwards, I think I sent him, I kind of picked out the logo and like a color, and then he like went and hijacked the CSS and like built this. So this is the site kind of as it is today. Also, I would like to mention that tomorrow, this page may or may not be changing tomorrow in an announcement at Gina Bolton's talk. Not promising anything. Yes, we are. And then Hamel got a remake, though, so it's kind of cool looking now. Anyhow, all right, so Hamel's this project going on. I'd kind of been going for a little while myself, right? And then I start getting patches from people, right? So it's cool, right? People are helping. That's awesome. And then I start getting one person in particular just keeps sending in patches. Like one day patch, 2 days later, another patch, adding all these features. And I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Turns out it's Nathan Weizenbaum. He just started a torrent of patches, just expanding the language to do all the things I kind of said it wasn't going to do. But I was like, honestly, half the reasons why I didn't want to build those features is because I'm not that kind of a good programmer. Nathan's got this ability to look at just dive into super complexity, and I'm the guy who builds websites. I like code for people. I get really confused when I'm looking at a super parser. Anyhow, so Nathan just starts submitting so much that I'm just I'm having to approve these things, and I realized he was beyond my ability. So the way he became a core team member was I just kind of gave him access and was like, okay, go do. And he did, and it was awesome. So we did that for a while, and then I kind of had a couple people ask me, I wish we could have they really wanted dynamic style sheets. So I want to somehow put my style sheets through something like Hamel or ERB, which is the Rails templating language. And they're like, I want to make dynamic style sheets. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a bad idea. And then I was like, but maybe we could do that with some, maybe if it's not dynamic, we could do something there. And so at RailsConf 2005, 6, something, it's in San Diego. I don't know, look up when that was. That guy like that. I had kind of written up a spec, in a text document, and I convinced Nathan and I met for the first time there. He was when he first started, I think you were 16, I think that's right, or 17, close, something in there. I had to I'm going to totally embarrass you. Before we were like, we'll fly you out to RailsConf because this guy's amazing. And I had to talk to his mom because come on, I mean, you send your kid off to somebody on the internet wants your kid to go to San Diego. They're buying flights. So she's a good mom for that, right? So we had to like talk to her and be like, no, we're a real company. Your son's really helped us. Like we want to. So we're in San Diego, and I just started pitching Nathan really hard. I think at first he was just like, oh God, Hampton's talking crazy again. It's a little bit like when you hear Chris, his working relationship with Nathan. I kind of had the same thing because it's just like crazy ideas, and then like, okay. So I did for 2 commits, I think, 1 or 2, which are basically just modeling out some of what a CSS parser might look like. And then Nathan just went apeshit on the way home. Like he was flying back and just like coded a working version basically because he's freaking amazing. Actually we don't do this enough. Nathan, you have to stand up and we're all gonna applaud you. And everybody go look at him because that's Nathan. He likes to hide. He's in the very far back. So, seriously. 7 years. That was 7 years ago, and he's been doing it nonstop for 7 years. That's insane. That is insane. And he's designed almost all of the language himself, by the way. I mean, I started with some basic stuff, but holy crap. So that's my like whoa, because he's the one consistent thread throughout SASS, and I may have had a crazy idea and been able to convince him, but it would have died so fast, just so fast. None of us, it wouldn't even be. 7 years of hard work is what it takes for all of us to be in this room and to have the kind of stories we have about how it's easier to do this stuff now, how our companies can work differently, how you're working on the coolest new stuff. And if there's any better testament to kind of stick to it attitude, I think Nathan's the guy to look to. I'm confusing my words. Anyhow, he fucking rocks. So part of my thing, why I was having some of these ideas and wanted to push them was I was really pissed off about CSS3. Everyone else on the entire planet was like, yay! And I was like, you didn't change anything from my perspective as a programmer, right? Because CSS still just kind of looked like this. Like I was doing this shit all over the place. Yep, CSS3. Guys, look, now it's CSS2. Now it's CSS3. Now it's CSS2. Can you tell the difference? And so I've always now had this lifelong hate of gradients because that was what everybody flipped their shit about. Gradients are lovely, I guess. But that's all, like, it was like, you just added properties, and the programmer part of my brain's like, so you did nothing to the language. This is like browser 3 is what you're really talking about. Nothing to do with the actual language itself. And so, yeah, that's SASS-tastic. And nesting was definitely the kind of number one, because I just kept doing that, right? And we'd want to change one ID, and then it's like, find a replace, let's do that. I think somebody said they were going to show this before, but this is the original way SASS looked in its very earliest form. Most people who use the older or indented SASS syntax don't write it this way. I think it still works. Does it? I think we dropped it, yeah. But it used to be because it was Haml, right? It was the Haml. It was in the Haml repo. This was just, if you get Haml, hey guys, come check out this SASS shit. And it starts with a semicolon because it's a control character, right? It's like, what? It does still work. Sweet. Backwards compatibility, +1. Yeah, but it was like, because, in our heads, this was the Haml project, right? We just wanted to do some of this cool CSS stuff, but this is for Haml people, and they understand this. But very quickly, we moved the where the colon is. And then, yeah, obviously variables was kind of a big thing for me. And that, that's because my role in kicking this thing off, those were the things that pissed me off that weren't in CSS. And so I wanted to try to fix that. But obviously since then, I mean, my God, the talks today, some of the stuff people are showing what they're doing and how to do things is just like insane when you give people that power, right? And it just kept expanding and expanding. And then one of those people who was really pushing that expansion was Chris Epstein. Yeah, it kind of started that, I remember when Chris first told me about Compass, and I was so confused what it was. Because it was like, it's Blueprint initially, and now it's a framework, and then it's got some other stuff. And it took a year, and he was kind of working on it. He would not, we kept talking, he's got a little demo video, and then one day it just hit me, and I'm like, oh, it's a standard library plus some framework utilities. Okay, now I get it. And obviously that's been a crazy project, but he was always sending these emails like, hey, I needed to do this. It doesn't do that. I needed to do this. And I think Nathan and I were both like, okay, why we don't do that stuff? Because neither one of us are really CSS developers. Anyhow, Chris is now the new generator of all the extreme crazy ideas, and the SASS script and all the coolness there, that is that guy right there. Give him a freaking hug for that stuff. Or a round of applause. That's better than a hug, or I don't know. A hug's also great. Okay. And then basically I get distracted very easily. I have a history of kicking off things and then, just I try to convince people to help with it. But so during the period while these guys are working their ass off, thanklessly, so I built a dictionary called Dictionary! I wish I could yell. It sold like 70 million copies, free but ad-based, and I got to retire for a couple of years, so that was fun. I was like, fuck this Haml shit. I'm going to just live off this. And I also made a Wikipedia app because there wasn't anything. And then I got a call from the Wikimedia lawyer saying, hey, your thing's called iWik, Wikipedia for your iPhone. You can't say Wikipedia. The logo looks like the Wikipedia logo. We're going to have to sue you unless you take this down. And probably one of the other best ideas in my whole life, I went, or you could buy it, and we could make this the app. So for $5,000, the Wikimedia Foundation bought my iWik and gave me a job building it, which was awesome. So I went and I spent 3 years, I think, there. And I designed, built, you could tell the design aesthetic. Designed, built, maintained, scaled, language internationalized, and did all that shit. Wikipedia Mobile for a lot of years and got that project going. It looks a lot better now. They actually have proper designers on it. But yeah, so that's cool. That was the other thing I was doing. And yeah, we got up to 2 billion pages a month. And it was a shit ton of code to pull that off. The design didn't change very much because there's all this logging infrastructure and blah, 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 just horrible. I was spending my days working on code that's, nothing a user would appreciate. And this period of my life really taught me, while I love the back end and I'm pretty damn good at it, it's required but not super high value. There were major design issues that were not being addressed. And I was just having to stress myself out, just keeping the servers up, making sure we're load balancing properly, all that kind of fun stuff you have to do when you're doing 2 billion pages. Basically, so I struggled with this. I wrote all this code, right? And I was like, this got to be freaking simpler than this. There's got to be a better, how could I have made my job easier to pull off what I needed to do? And so that's MoveWeb, and that's what we do, basically. We help companies, especially with existing code like HTML, it's hard to change. In Wikimedia, I could not just walk in and be like, yeah, so we're just going to restructure all the article pages in every language out there with different designs and skins and a giant community supporting all that. So just because I want a mobile version. It didn't work. It doesn't really work. So MoveWeb's kind of the productization of that and kind of a framework for that. And we use SASS in MoveWeb. It's actually built into our framework. So when we have an enterprise developer using our tool, when they write CSS, it is SASS. We just train them. This is what you use. It's very straightforward. So by that, we get a couple companies who use this on their sites now. But one of the problems is these become big projects. When you work at a big company and you're on a big team doing big things on a big site, your big desk, it can get really slow to compile SASS. I don't know how many people here work on really big teams doing SASS stuff, but if everybody just keeps writing their own mix-ins, you can get 10, 15-minute compile times if there's no good cache sitting there, and it's crazy. I know LinkedIn's kind of talk at all about that. Okay, so there's a couple of guys there. This is why they brought in Chris, because they have a whole lot of people writing SASS code, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So then they've kind of had to build out a distributed system to help with the compiling, or at least that was the plan for a while. But that's and it was happening in my company too. We're helping with our toolkit. It's just all of a sudden my server timed out, my browser timed out because the SASS was compiling too long. So luckily, when you're running a business and the business is doing pretty okay, you can do some shit like, let's just rewrite SASS in C, everyone. This will be fast. So that's libsass. Libsass is now a year-old project, trying to keep up with the super fast development speed of the SASS team. Why did you guys have to get a second wind? It's really killing us. It's like, we got all these every new feature you're mentioning, I'm just like, fuck, okay. It's so much to do now. Yeah. So it's a C port, C++, and it's basically built, you cannot run libsass yourself. Like if you download it, it doesn't do anything. It's just like libraries. But it's designed to be super easy to drop into anything you need it to go into. So if you write in Python and you want to use this, there's a really easy way. It's very straightforward to write bindings for this. We have Node already. There's Node-SASS is based off libsass. There's also, GoSASS. So we use the Go programming language internally. I've unfortunately not gotten a Ruby binding working yet. But if anybody's really good at native bindings in Ruby, I keep getting a weird seg fault. So somebody help. No, every time I run it, no. It's one of those like horrible CSS, like computer science technical problems. I run it on the command line, and half the time it works, and half the time it fails. The exact same one test. Welcome to the world of memory pointers and insanity. So yeah, I'll figure that out one day. Yeah, so Aaron Leung's the guy who's been kind of guy on my team who likes writing parsers and languages, and so we funded him to work on this. Support's a tricky thing. Because a lot of people ask, like, where is it really in its development? It's hard because there's so many edge cases that exist. You know, when you take a 7-year-old project that is at every, like, you guys are crazy. You use the craziest freaking CSS. Like, the SASS test, like, set can break almost every other CSS parser out there if it's not in a browser. Like, it's every edge case you could possibly find, because that's what breaks SASS. So you got to go make a new test case for all the crazy shit. You know, but it's hard because there's like trade-offs, white space issues, that kind of stuff. But libsass is what is bundled with our framework now. So most of those companies, whether they know it or not, are using libsass. The 3.3 features are not in there because it wasn't released till today. Extends is a little funky. That's the main one. The full extends logic is not currently ported. It works in like some basic cases, but you can break it. But it does work with Bourbon at this point. And so help if you know C, please. We need more people helping with this. Oh yeah, this is just this. It's meant to be dropped in though. I mean, this is, while this, if you guys aren't C coders, looks really complicated, this is basically the simplest thing you can possibly build in C. Like compile the 3 things, free it, make it, that's it. So the idea is just, this is the whole interface you have to the language, so just drop it in. Because, you know, it was like, Les made this great decision of going JavaScript, right? They were originally Ruby, it was getting some traction, then it's like, let's write in JavaScript because it's simple. And then everyone's like, yay, JavaScript, and it's getting more popular, so we'll go with that. So you kind of have to, how do you out-tack them a little bit? And that's, you know, a lot of companies can't go run JavaScript or don't want to do it in the browser, or their build system would be more complicated. So it's either Java or C, because like one of those you get big swaths of developers. But this gets a pretty big chunk of them. So PHP, it's easy to do there. Pretty much any language that is in Java, really. Actually, you can do it in Java, by the way. So libsass.org, that just launched today. Yay. It's much simpler than the SASS site. It didn't even need applause. It's like we wrote some content. It's got the cool logo on it. But you should go look at that more. OK. That's a joke. Come on, you're supposed to laugh. I couldn't find a good segue for this. So to me, the user experience stuff that most of us are dealing with, it's about communicating with humans. Most stuff I do are API-driven stuff. It's about machines. So this just start off with a little bit of a definition, right? Because it's important what you actually say to humans who are your customers and users, right? And you know, that used to just be kind of use Photoshop and then walk away, and somebody would use some tables and something would happen, and it'd get delayed and then launched. But at this point, web designers, by the way, I'm just flipping in the word web designer and UX and anything all in the same place to mean the same thing. Because it is that simple, I think, right? So web designers need to understand CSS, especially with responsive web design, because now the UX is bound up in the rendering details. Frameworks can obviously help with this some, but you just can't go make what you want. So a lot of times when we're working with companies, we'll find the crusty old UX engineer who's just like, okay, this is how I want mobile to be, this is how I want desktop, this is how I want this is how I want that. No, switch those now. And then their teams typically doing responsive web design stuff just freak out because you're like, no, that's not how it works. And so really, though, this is kind of building out a whole new expertise that I generally try to refer to as interface developers. So it's really just focused on what is the user actually seeing, what are they touching, what are they feeling, what do they smell, right? And there's always been this idea, especially with if you're somebody who just works in CSS, that you're not a real developer. I hate that. That makes me so angry. And that was the attitude, honestly, even with Hamel before, right? Like, oh, we'll do the real programming. You guys just, I'll throw shit at you, and then you'll work it out. But that's so crappy because it's so important. It is, I'm getting ahead of myself on my slides, but it's like probably it is the most important part about your product. I guess people stealing credit card numbers might be more important, but you know. But less technical does not mean less value to your site or business. And you know that group of interface developers, a lot of you guys, disempowered by traditional tools and organizations, try to go get a job at a big company and see how much empowerment you're given to actually improve things. Yeah, just try to get them using SASS. Good luck. And you know, this is end up to be where this is today's creative process. It's step one, do a deep analysis of design needs, build a beautiful design in Photoshop, show those interfaces, those designs to everyone, and get a huge round of applause. Oh, some really good work. And then it just kind of gets merged into the big rewrite that's happening maybe, I don't know, there's something, Rails node something, new Java something, and then it just never happens. As a matter of fact, I love hiring people who are refugees from this happening at companies. They come in with a lot more pragmatism than they started with. Yeah, and so this is ridiculous, right? Because to the user, the interface is the product. And then I just have Raskin, by the way, because there's Jeff and Ian, I think. And I've seen it credited both ways. So I've switched it twice in talks, and then people just go, no, it's the other way around. So it's Raskin, one of them. But this is so important, right? Like the user, that's all they see, right? They don't think about anything else. And because users really experience things differently than you do, even as an interface developer. I mean, for instance, take this, right? So there's a button. Hopefully that's clear. And so we'll look at that. What you see and what your users see. You see the CSS framework, your authentication library, ugly code, that you need to go refactor that. They should fire the guy who wrote it. Steve's a total asshole. But what do your users see? A fucking button. That's it. Just a button. Just a button. That's all. Is it? And so, for instance, when you look at, this is the Move Web Management Console. This is where I spend a lot of my life making sure this works well. And you look at this, you're like, oh, okay, see, it's a page. It's a page. Look at that page right there. This is what I see. Like, I can't. Actually, this is like the most simple version I could possibly have. I just see our crazy cloud network running all these huge websites, and yes. And I'm thinking of all these things, right? Because backend's kind of a tyranny to your mind. It's what a lot of you guys, I mean, you guys, some of you guys here, you spend all day trying to fix your mixin. We brought a little bit of that tyranny to the front end, right? But your user doesn't really care. Now, obviously, there's value. I'm not saying this is a profession and you need to do that kind of stuff, right? But your users don't really care. That creative stuff is what's really most valuable to your users, and it has real impact. Changing a button on your site, that your user will be like, whoa, new button, that's exciting. If you kind of refactor your code a little bit, they're like, that's the same site, nothing happened. And I do want to note, so what I'm about to talk about, a lot of these, it's less of a problem if you're an agency or a small team with a web app or kind of a hobbyist, because you're as empowered as you want to be, right? If I'm doing a one-off site for Coca-Cola, on a tight deadline. I'm not downplaying the work, but it's a lot easier, right? I mean, I go, what tool do I want to use? I'll pick it. How do I want to structure this? Which framework do I want to use? Most web developers in the world don't fall into the bucket. I think most people here would be in these buckets, probably including myself. I'm working at a relatively small company. I can change markup if I want. But there's a mass out there of people who do not fall in this bucket. And they don't get to come to conferences like this. And their lives are primarily pretty miserable. And that's where I'm spending a lot of my time now. I mean, I think when Chris talks about bringing SASS out to the world, it's great that you guys who all get to know the latest tools and get to use it and enjoy it. But how do we get it out there to groups that right now don't go to these kind of conferences? They go to Interop or some giant IT conference, right? But they're people too. They're people too, guys. And so to me, though, I'm a guy who architects shit. So I look at this problem as, maybe there's something fundamentally wrong, that we're causing these interface developers at big companies and larger teams to just kind of get sidelined. This is the way we've typically done web development. It's one big app, right? Just throw it in there. Small team, and this is primarily the way small teams, agencies, and stuff will do things, right? But we know that it sucks at scale. I mean, if you talk to people at big companies, they're like, no, you don't do that. Bad idea. So that's why we do service-oriented web. We basically break out parts of that application. So that meeting with 100 people can now be a meeting with 20. Small groups. But it's a requirement, right? You can't just be like, OK, I'm working on this, and you're working over here, and there's no coordination. Building a services layer really helps that, right? Because you're like, hey, we upgraded, but we didn't change the interface. So high five, everyone. And then a lot of times, I've been dealing a lot with the mobile stuff. And this is the way a lot of companies have kind of approached it. Let's just try to rebuild. I could go on a mini rant about mobile first. Probably anger some people. But a lot of times they'll be like, hey, we got a desktop. We're just going to go build a mobile site, and then that will become our desktop site. Mobile first is a great design process. When used pragmatically, it typically, if you ever get to the point of actually copying the code, all the business logic over, it looks like a really simple desktop site. I don't know if anybody's used one that was built that way. You can totally tell, because it's like just big buttons everywhere. And you're like, OK, that's cool, but I'm a desktop user. Make this faster for me. Keyboard shortcuts and stuff. Anyhow, that's a longer rant. That's probably a whole other talk I could do. So here's my proposal. And this is just architecture, not implementation. There's a lot of different ways to pull this off. But it's basically to build a service-oriented or experience-oriented front-end design. Why does the fact that if I have an if statement around my user being logged in or not, and how we display their name, if we put a comma behind it, or whatever business logic you have, the URL for a page, why does that have to be bound up with all the decisions on the front end? So why can't you just have people be able to iterate in these smaller groups and be able to pull cool things off? So it basically works like this. You take the web, and then web layer is defined as kind of paths. Basic HTML, because HTML is how your users view the world. APIs make really bad websites. Like, you can't just click through an API. I mean, anybody who's actually programmed against API, you got to go read those docs for a while. HTML is for people, right? So that's why you make this layer for people. And then on top of that, you can change out the CSS. You can change out the JavaScript. You can kind of work at a different layer. And we've actually had a lot of success with this, because it breaks up interface development from web development. And part of that, too, the way my team uses this technique is that we actually have our back-end developers, or what we consider our back-end web developers. This is what they build. Yeah, because they're guys like me. The markup behind this is beautiful, though, by the way. And the code is super well tested, and it's workable. You can actually use this. And that search field, by the way, has some cool JavaScript to help with working with the APIs to do the search. Then I have an entirely separate team that does not really touch this code that goes and builds this, or builds this. These are the same pages. Or I didn't like this design at all. So in 2 weeks, we just replaced it with this without having to work with the web team at all. So obviously, a small company, this is not an issue. But a big company, this is like black magic. We actually redesigned our own site in 2 weeks. Mock-ups took a little longer because, designers. I wish I could remember the name of the font right now. Yeah, so we were able to actually pull that off because the markup was clean. We made a couple changes to it and restyled it, and bam. And so it was cool because the deployment cycles weren't the same. We actually pushed this out without really coordinating. But sometimes there are little things you need to change to pull this off, right? Like anybody who's done responsive web design, you know that like there's moments where you just would beg to the universe that the HTML was structured just slightly differently. Like, this would be so much easier if this would just move. Or what's wrong with my backend team? Which is why you see things like REST, right? So responsive with server-side components, Luke Werboleski's thing. We're just basically saying, hey, occasionally an if statement would really help pull this off a lot quicker. And but there were really tools to make this easier, right? You can do an if statement in your HTML, but there wasn't really a way, hey, this is what I did with Wikimedia. I just wanted to remove a couple things off the page. And I thought hiding them was kind of dumb. So how do I pull that off without having to coordinate some crazy, super tested code, right? So that's my new language, my fourth language. Does anybody here besides Nathan know what my third language was? It was never actually fully done. Yeah, you're the other one. Yeah. Anyhow, it was Jabble. It was evented like CoffeeScript for JavaScript. Anyhow, I never properly finished it. Sorry. Fuck you, CoffeeScript. But so Tritium, it's basically a document transformation language. And that is, think XSLT, but not horrible. Or if you're a command line junkie, it's like sed, but for humans. So you basically take A and turn it into B. We have this problem. I want A, and I want to make it a little different. And that's where Tritium comes in. So you see, here's a simple function, replace Hampton with awesome. And then there's some incoming content. I know a Hampton, and it's I know a awesome. And then we also, first level in this language is regular expressions. So we can do some crazy regular expression shit. So I don't care if it's capitalized or not, we'll do the same thing. Then there's even crazy callback stuff if you want to get really fancy with manipulating the text. So I know you're an ant if it matches with the, anyhow. Yeah, so you could pull off really crazy tricks. It looks like you could also do this in JavaScript, clearly. You could also do this in a regular programming language. But basically, this is ridiculously fast. It compiles into a bytecode. So it is pretty awesome for efficiency. Also, you can't, another constraint of this language, if it compiles, it will execute, always. So if it will turn to that bytecode, it will run. Something will happen. Input will come in, output will come out, which is really important for actually using this at scale with a real big company. You can't be like, nil error. You can't have that in production. So those are just some text manipulations. This is clearly where things get fancier. You can parse the HTML and then select a table and replace it with divs. This is a thing when we're working with legacy stuff that a row of people back there do a lot. It's basically go through an old table design and try to update it. And one of the parts of this language, too, is that it's got scopes, are a really big idea. So I can do text things up at the beginning. HTML is a text function. And then everything inside, there's actually a node function. So now once I've parsed it, I don't have a parse tree until I've called that. And now we can actually walk through the tree and do stuff. And then at the end, it turns back into text. So this is used all over the place for attributes and a whole bunch of other things, as you'll see here. So this, all it does, find the table and add the class table to a div, like replace that thing. So you can pipe through a website through this thing, and it will just replace all the tables with divs with a class table, which if you're trying to redesign something is really useful to not have to go ask somebody, can you go change that nav bar on the left because it says table right now and I can't design around this. And soon I am here to announce, so this is right now built into the MoveWeb product that we sell to big super companies. But in 2014, right at the beginning, we're going to be open sourcing Tritium as its own project. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's always been our intention, but when you're like building a business, you get kind of distracted. But yes, Tritium's actually going to be an open source project. And I'm kind of curious. It's a thing that XSLT, I don't know if people were web developers in the late 90s. People thought transformations were going to be the thing that would save us all, long before CSS got too powerful. They thought you'd have an XML page, and then right up at the top, you'd define what the page should kind of look like, how to interpret the data. XSLT was just terrible. It's a horrible language to work with. I could give a whole talk on that. Or if you've tried it, you know. And so that just fell totally flat. And actually, pretty much everybody forgets this. I mean, with the W3C, all the tech writers, every conferences like this, we would just be talking about how these transformations would save the web. And it didn't work. And I'm kind of interested to see if you actually bring in a decent language and decent performance performance specifications, and make it really easy for a JavaScript developer to pull this kind of shit off, what happens? I don't actually know. So we've kind of used it for big companies who have very particular problems. But I'm kind of very interested in just putting this tool out there that you can't do this today. You can't go to Wikipedia and just replace shit on the page with other stuff. But what happens when you just do put that onto the internet? We'll see. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. Who knows? But all this, though, is to make sure that interface needs to stand up on its own, right? It can't just be this kind of siloed thing. I'm on a mission through a whole bunch of different ways that I can to try to go and make sure that the people who are delivering experiences to your actual customers and users are given the right tools and respect in organizations. Because that back end just sucks all the time out. I mean, I don't think I need to preach to most people here on that particular issue, because I'm sure you've all suffered through that. Unless you haven't had a job before, and then the world is candy and rainbows, and everybody will love your idea. But we really need to change this. We really need to make sure, now that we've given power to CSS, now that you can do crazy shit with CSS, how do we turn that into stuff that you can tell your boss about? I mean, that's honestly where it gets down to it. For most of the world, they've got to do that, right? And so how do we do that? Because I don't think it's just enough that the cool kids get to use this, that we get to use this because we get to pick the tools we use. How do we make the lives of all those anonymous interface developers out there better and more like ours, to be honest, where we can have great arguments about naming conventions. One last point. I think I'm right at the end now. How's my time? Just about there. Okay. I have one more slide. It's just a super mini rant, and I'll make it mini this time. And just if I pissed anyone off here so far, I'm about to do it worse. Stop bringing the back end to the front. I don't understand why we're fucking doing that. Okay, all right. So I made a language where you can do some programming in your CSS, because that's a great place to put it. That's a good place to put it, because you need to do some stuff, right? You need the power to do this. But I don't understand why we're having to reinvent everything. All of a sudden, projects that in Rails I could have gotten done in 3 days are now like 6 weeks of development, because my model's the same as it is on the server, and it's in my browser. Like, if you're building a crazy interface, sure, go for it, right? Have fun. If you're just building a content site, you don't need Backbone. What is wrong with people? I honestly think developers just get bored a lot. You're just like, I don't like this career anymore. Doing this in Rails would take me fucking a day. And so we're going to do it this way now. I just don't get it, because I see so many Hacker News posts, and there's coming out with tools that were already out before. What was that? Angry person or happy person? Sorry. Anyhow, I guess I think I'm just old school and crotchety, but I like server-side stuff. I've never spent 3 days debugging my HTML itself. It always just does what the hell I need it to do. So there you go. Anyhow, I already did my inspiring moment earlier, so let's help people who aren't like us. Give money to the poor enterprise developers. All right, follow me at @HCatlin. Thanks so much. By the way, this whole conference is organized by these awesome people here in New York without any of us involved in SASS or on the code part having to do any work, which is just amazing that they put all this together. So super round of applause for that. And thank you guys for... Somebody else coming up, or am I just going to keep... I can keep going.
No, we'll kick you off.
Somebody one time told me that my main, if there was a meme generator for me, it's me calling things bullshit. So I could just do that. Front-end frameworks, bullshit. Fucking bullshit, man. Sorry.